Wow, this whole cold open thing is completely new to me. So this is, you always have to think of something to say. We were on Grand Rapids last week, Steve, and when I was at MD&M this week in Anaheim, our host at the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, their booth layout, it was the coolest thing. They had Grand Rapids on one side of the booth, a big, like 20-foot tall picture of the skyline. And on the other side, they had Detroit. And it was kind of this like subtle nod to one side of the state to the other.
They kind of bookend everything with
Yeah.
cities on either side.
It was pretty slick. I really liked that. So we're actually going to have one item from Medical Device and Manufacturing Trade Show that I was at along with Nate Johnson from our team this week. It's going to be at the end, an interview with Kelli Jonas from MediSurge. When we did the item last week about ethylene oxide and the EPA's crackdown on ethylene oxide sterilizers, I wasn't expecting to bump into Kelli in Anaheim, but as we got to talking, it became very, very clear that they are directly impacted by this at MediSurge and many other medical device manufacturers. And Kelli had some very definite opinions. That'll be coming at the end of today, the interview with her, but it was a fascinating deep dive. Serves as a bookend, speaking of bookends, to that question of what's going to happen with the EPA's crackdown. So all that and much more coming up on MedTech Crossroads. So just a reminder that MedTech Crossroads is now on Spotify. We're also going to roll it out to the other streaming platforms, but as of today, you can get to it on Spotify. So enjoy it there. Upcoming events coming up next. We draw these from MEDC, MishBio, Project MedTech, Ann Arbor Spark, the US FDA's event calendar, the Regulatory Affairs Professionals Society, and we keep adding sources for these events. First up on February 14th, the IP and Legal Expert Virtual Coffee Break. I was just with Stephen Rapundelow at the event in Anaheim, and they're running this so that companies can get in contact with a lawyer about things surrounding intellectual property and other startup and company-related things. So what a great opportunity there. If you're watching online, you can scan the QR code for these to find out what's happening there and get in contact. The US FDA on February 17th has the application of artificial intelligence and machine learning for precision medicine. AI/ML is huge. And how does it apply to personalized and precision medicine? That's what they're talking about on February 17th. U of M's running Biomedical Innovation 101. Fast forward in the Department of Internal Medicine. Our own Adrian Harris is going to be on the February 15th installment of that, biomedical device development, but they're running on for another handful of sessions after that. The Regulatory Affairs Professional Society, a whole bunch of programs. We've selected a few here. One is on software as a medical device. This one is actually going to be a virtual program. So if you are into CMD and you want to hear right from a whole bunch of folks involved in the regulation of it, this would be a great place to go. There's a cybersecurity conference happening in Germany right at the end of this month. And I've said this before, I think that cybersecurity is one of the great untouched areas in medical devices. Now that everybody wants everything connected, it's only natural that we're going to have problems with that. And so cybersecurity, beyond things like biocompatibility and sterilization, et cetera, is raising its head for medical devices. So a conference there, this one in Germany, on cybersecurity. The legislative fly-ins are happening this spring. Get in contact with MishBio if you're interested. The last time I went on one of these was in 2016, and it was an absolute eye-opener to see the level of nuance, actually, that staffers on Capitol Hill are able to think about and discuss topics germane to your industry. I was actually blown away because I think the media sort of tells us that it's all just one big thing, pick your side of the aisle and fight the battles. But I was blown away with the level of nuance from both sides of the aisle that we heard from even junior staffers, let alone when we got to talk to folks in Congress and senators. So that's coming up this spring. The RAPS webcast, MDR by the numbers, on the 23rd of February. This is going to be a fascinating one. It's free. But what's happening in Europe? What's happening with the medical device regulation? How is that panning out? That's going to be a great place to hear all about that. The Resi conference, I was at the main Resi conference in San Francisco in January. There's a digital Resi connecting early stage products with capital and channel partners. This could be interesting to get involved with if you or someone you love is involved in fundraising for an early stage medtech startup. The Resi conference, this virtual one coming up March 14th through 16th. And this one new to the list this week, the MedCon conference, Columbus, Ohio, April 24th through 27th, co-sponsored by the FDA. This is very much like the old Xavier conferences that used to be there. So looking forward to having these back. Jeff Shuren is supposed to be the keynote for this, and we're looking forward to being back in person, Columbus, Ohio, April 24th through 27th. There's an innovation summit happening that same week in Dublin, Ireland, the MedTech Strategist Innovation Summit. And as far as training goes, AdvaMed is running a FDA 510K and de novo submissions workshop in May 15th through 17th, IDE submissions workshop May 18th through 19th, and a PMA submissions workshop May 23rd through 27th. If you're watching online, you can scan the QR code to get connected or go to the AdvaMed website. Project MedTech, I had the privilege of meeting Dwayne and Rich at an event organized by John Siemens from the University of Michigan. Great guys, working on some great stuff with Project MedTech, the Midwest Showcase coming up in August in Cleveland, Ohio. They're also having a conference in Texas. We'll tell you about that in a minute. And the MedTech conference, the AdvaMed MedTech conference, coming up October 9th through 11th at Anaheim at the Convention Center we were just at for MD&M. The focus of AdvaMed, very much more the regulatory, political, and strategic things. MD&M that we were just at, very much components, vendors, manufacturers. And as promised, Project MedTech, October 25th through 26th. The Startup Symposium happening at Texas Medical Center in Houston, Texas. There's another AI summit coming up in November, as well as the Eye and the Chip 2023, Dr. Hesberg's conference happening at the Southfield Westin, thanks to Henry Ford Health System. But that's coming up in November. And those are the events for today. There we go. So we're trying this new format out where we take you through the news, but we do it looking at the news. And back in the news is clinical decision support software. Oh, this whole question of SAMD, software as a medical device. Is my software regulated? And of course, the reality is sometimes yes, sometimes no. Back in episode 122, we talked about this graphic that the FDA had issued at the time. It's a nice flow chart, and the question is, if your software function does not acquire, process, or analyze medical images, signals, or patterns, your software function displays, analyzes, or prints medical information normally communicated between healthcare professionals. Your software function provides recommendations rather, there it is, there's the key, rather than provide a specific output or directive. And your software function provides the basis of recommendations, meaning it's going to give you the references. Why would you say that this is a recommendation? Did you come up with it on your own, dear piece of software? Or did you, as a recommendation, did you come up with it on your own, dear piece of software? Or did you reference some established literature? So that the healthcare practitioner does not rely primarily on any recommendations to make a decision, then your software function may be a non-device clinical decision support software. Seems nice and clear. Nice way to go through it. You can take this checklist, this flowchart, and you can look at it. We covered this in episode 122. You can look back there if you want a little more information on FDA's thinking. But today, we have industry's thinking. This from MedTech Dive, the wonderful folks at MedTech Dive for all your MedTech news. There's a trade group pushing back on the FDA's clinical decision support software guidance. Now, why would this be? It seems like more clarity is a good thing. Wouldn't we want the clarity that FDA has brought to bear on this? Well, maybe, maybe not. Here's the problem. This trade group, which is called the Clinical Decision Support Coalition, being represented down here by Bradley Merrill Thompson, an attorney with Epstein Becker Green, is saying that the guidance broadens the FDA's oversight over software tools. It's not just a clarification of what's going on or how to make these decisions, because they're saying there were things that were previously exempted that now, with this guidance, are being brought under oversight. I can see why they would not like this. They cite the 21st Century Cures Act as being the thing that should give them the right to put these devices, these software devices, forward to the market. And they say that some of these systems could have been exempted from FDA regulation if healthcare providers could independently review the basis of recommendations. But under the regulator's final guidance, so we showed you a graphic, but that graphic doesn't represent the whole guidance here. Under the regulator's final guidance, more predictive tools would now be regulated as medical devices. Potential stroke or sepsis alerts are in focus there. So some people are saying it's helpful, but some are saying this is at odds. Now, this is really the punchline down here from the MedTech Dive article. They say, notably, they want the agency to clarify that clinical decision support software can recommend a single diagnosis or treatment pathway, and the time-critical nature of the decision would not automatically result in it being regulated as a medical device. Well, if you've heard this show any number of times, you know that I'm going to raise a little skepticism over this, because if you are in a time-critical situation and you make a decision based on the software, aren't you really giving responsibility to that software? If you're making a decision faster than you could otherwise, doesn't that go against the spirit of the clinician making the decision and understanding fully the basis of their decision? If you're making a knee-jerk reaction because software told you to, isn't the software in control? I think it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out. FDA has 6 months to respond to this petition. Great report there from MedTech Dive. But it certainly goes back to what we were talking about in episode 122. Is FDA off base here? Are they grabbing for things that aren't their business to regulate? Time's going to tell, and maybe in 6 months we'll have an answer. But I don't like going on the record when I don't have to. But if we were betting on this, I'm going to bet that FDA does not say, "Oh, sure, make a snap decision based on software. It'll be fine." And if I'm wrong, I will eat my words. So that's clinical decision support software. Industry is pushing back. When we were at MD&M, we heard a lot about diagnostic firms shrinking, restructuring, pulling back. Folks making plastic parts for the diagnostic industry saying, yeah, we've been seeing this coming. Can't tell you who, but yep, there's a big pullback coming. This also from MedTech Dive. The good folks at MedTech Dive, Nick Paul Taylor, this is his article. Diagnostic firms turn to restructuring in bid to preserve cash. Goldman reporting on this, I guess, originally. Restructuring programs by diagnostic companies. Companies like Q Health, GeneDx, and Invitae. I found elsewhere that Baxter posted a $2.43 billion loss in 2022. So yeah, Concerns about cash runway and profitability? Sounds legitimate. 360DX has this page on layoffs. Guardant Health lays off 7% of their workforce. Lucid Diagnostics lays off 20% of their workforce. Biocept laying off 35% of staff. If you go back a few months to August of 2022, Quanterix slashing its workforce by 25%. Middle of last year, more layoffs by Invitae, and it goes back and back and back. So this clearly is an issue. Is this something having to do with COVID just isn't as prevalent and popular as it was before? It's a little hard to say. People are digesting this, but the response here is clearly drops in profitability, right? Like there are actually losses happening at places like Baxter. So they say restructuring is the top theme. And that's going to mean layoffs. So kind of sad news there out of the diagnostics industry. It's not all of medtech. All of medtech is not crashing around us, but the diagnostic industry definitely having a moment. And actually, since we're on diagnostics, I'm going to switch the order up just a little bit here. This came out from FDA. It's a class 1 recall, which is the highest level of recall. Yet another, folks. Do not use Skippack, medical lab SARS-CoV-2 antigen rapid test. Another lab test for SARS-CoV, English language. Here we go. Another rapid antigen test for COVID that is not authorized, cleared, or approved by the FDA for distribution or use in the United States, but is still being distributed and used. This one called the Skippack. So if you see that, know to stay away if you're still using COVID tests. FDA has identified the issue as a class 1 recall. You can read this document through the link on the YouTube or Spotify page. So yeah, more of this. People selling tests that simply are not cleared. Not the greatest thing in the world, but it's still happening today. That's the world of diagnostics for this week. I want to take you next to what are called third-party reviews, and we're going to spend a little bit of time here because this is something that it's been a sales point. Some years ago, the FDA allowed third-party organizations for certain product codes to review 510Ks on behalf of the agency. Now, that didn't mean you were getting clearance from the third party, but it does mean that the bulk of the work of review is being done by the third party, blessed and then passed on to FDA for their approval. Or at least that's how it seems. Now, why would you insert a third party between you and your regulator? That seems like that would incur some challenges. But the promise is that it will go faster because the review time is shortened. And when it actually gets to the FDA no longer has 90 days to review it. They only have 30. So the idea is you're working back and forth with a friendly third party who gets you all ready. Then when you go to FDA, that review time is shortened from 90 days to 30 days. At least that's how it looks on paper. Let's take a look because this is the FDA's report on third-party review organizations. And under MDUFA 5, the Medical Device User Fee Act 5, of which we're in the first year here in fiscal year 2023, it looks like there has been about, what are we at here? 18? Do we have the number here? 18 submissions thus far. Fiscal year 2023 Q1, October 1st, 2022 through December 31st, 2022, because the fiscal year for FDA starts in October, not in January. And so while there have been, maybe we're looking at, no, I guess it would be 21. I'm not very good at doing this on the fly. Maybe I'm calling that 18. Third-party review organizations with at least 5 completed submissions for each fiscal year shown below if you're looking online. Before we talk about the data coming out of these organizations, here's the stages. This is how this works. So a third-party 510K submission goes through 4 different stages before a final decision is made by FDA. The third party gets the file from the 510K submitter. They review the file and send the file and its decision recommendation to FDA. Now, they're not going to send it if the decision is that we don't want to do this. They're going to work with you generally. FDA reviews the submission. Then, if they need to, they ask for additional information, an AI request. After that, the third party can come back to the FDA and give the submitter a chance to respond to FDA's concerns. Then FDA makes a final review and a final decision. So you've got these different chunks. Now, I think what's interesting about this is that while on paper, 30 days with FDA sounds better than 90 days with FDA, as many folks might tell you who've worked in this industry, most of your time is burnt after FDA comes back asking for additional information. When FDA comes back and says, hey, we need more information from you, you better be ready to give it because the clock is now ticking against you. It's not ticking against FDA. So is it really the FDA review time that hangs these things up? Or is it what FDA thinks about it? And frankly, how quickly can we get to what FDA thinks about it? That, at least in our experience, has been the critical thing. How do we get FDA's opinion as quickly as possible? So there's different ways to view this. This third-party review time, is it saving us time or is it losing us time? It's saving us time because it forces FDA to make a decision and a request for additional information more quickly, but it's losing us time because it's preventing us from getting to the agency quickly. It's making us go to a third party who may or may not have the same opinion as the FDA has and may or may not be in tune with the FDA's perspective. So there's a bunch of times involved in this. It certainly ups the complexity. And as of today, there are 9 third-party review organizations that you can go to: AABB, Beanstalk Ventures, Center for Measurement Standards of Industrial. That sounds like that's truncated, but we'll go with it. COLA, Inc., Global Quality and Regulatory Services. Interestingly, the New York State Department of Health, RTS, Regulatory Technology Services, SGS North America, and the Third Party Review Group, LLC. These are all organizations that you can go to for third-party review of certain FDA product codes. And this is fascinating. So between October and December, October 1st and December 31st, the initial review time for these, look at all these. Nobody did any except for RTS. RTS is the one group that had any data for this time period. So at least in that quarter, only one of these organizations was actually filing anything. And elapsed calendar days for the initial third-party review time, the average was around 150 days, which is interesting. What does that mean? What does that end up meaning? And actually, why is this data biased? Because the all 3 pros is different from this category. That's a fascinating thing there. The third-party review time here, that is beyond 90 days. I guess I'm just going to note that. Sometimes it's short. Sometimes it's very short down here, as low as maybe 25 days, right about there. About 50 days there at the bottom. Shouldn't really be expecting that. We're definitely up somewhere here in the mid 100 days, stretching as long at the end of the tail as 450 some days. The total FDA review time does indeed stay under 30 days, right? So Total FDA review time staying under that 30-day line. But that doesn't mean that we're getting even a 90-day review on average here. On average, we're probably seeing closer to 175 days total review time. Total time to decision from FDA receipt, that's staying almost within that 30-day window. And again, just not a lot. Oh, sorry, that's the 2023 data there. There's just not a lot of data here because the only one, again, that's been submitting is Regulatory Technology Services, RTS. Here's their total time to decision from third-party receipt. And I guess you got to say they've got their competitors beat because their competitors aren't doing anything today. But total time to decision, averaging here somewhere just shy of 200 days. Now, 200 days, that's greater than 90 days. That's true. But it's not true that every FDA 510K comes through in 90 days because there are pauses for an additional information request. And so FDA is not going to be average of 90. That's some data that we could look up. So what does this mean? Is the third-party review system dead? It's pretty clear that there's one group that's doing most of it, especially for the last quarter. But it's also not clear that there's acceleration here. That's something that needs to be looked at more. And as this data continues to come out, now that it's on our radar, we're going to be spending some time with it in upcoming quarters to see if these numbers change. But that's the news for today. A little bit on clinical decision support software, a little bit on the diagnostic firm layoffs and restructuring, third-party reviews, and of course that antigen test that people are selling without being FDA cleared. All right, and with that, we had a great time in Anaheim, California at the MD&M trade show, MD&M West Medical Device and Manufacturing. We were the guests of the Michigan Economic Development Corporation booth. We rented a kiosk there for Into Being, but along the way, of course, I love to bring a camera along and interview people. We'll be bringing you some content from the Michigan companies that were there in a coming week. But I wanted to follow up on this while it was timely. While I was there, I was talking with Kelli Jonas, who is the VP of Quality and Regulatory for MediSurge, a medical device manufacturer out of Grand Rapids. As I talked with her, I understood that one of their big selling points is that they're able to go through their government contracting connections and have a direct line for government contracts. So I guess for people who are interested in selling to the government, MediSurge definitely has an angle there that's worth checking out. But that's not where our discussion went. When Kelli and I met and were talking, ethylene oxide came up. And just last week on MedTech Crossroads, we brought you those news items, the $500 million fine against Sterigenics, the ethylene oxide groups that weren't reporting and now are because EPA is turning the heat up, Environmental Protection Agency. And we showed you a map that was I forget where it was. Steve, do you remember where it was? I don't even remember where it was. It was somewhere out west. It was a town, and they showed an ethylene oxide plant, and then they showed this heat map going outwards from the ethylene oxide plant, and they showed that their models show that the incidence of cancers will go up, the closer you are to that plant, and within this range, as you watch these numbers go up, there are neighborhoods. And of course, if this represents a real change in the probability of cancer, this is something to be concerned about. We shouldn't be living by these kinds of plants. These plants shouldn't be near us. That's a very, very valid concern if it's quantified correctly. There's another side to this question. Is this all a matter of environmental and public health? Or is there a risk, as we found during COVID, to not having access to medical devices? And that's where the conversation with Kelli went, because of course MediSurge is working with their clients to bring product to market. Some of that product is sterilized. One of the most common methods for sterilization is ethylene oxide, although we talked a little bit about alternative methods as a part of our discussion. And I think you'll enjoy this perspective that, like so many issues, there's not just one side to it. You can think and need to think about environmental health and public health for people that aren't using those devices and are just living near a plant. That's important. It's also important to make sure that medical devices make it to doctors and hospitals and make it there in an affordable way. We have a problem with the cost of healthcare in this country. What's the right answer? That's not ours to say. But as we work in this area of medical technology, developing devices, specifying means for sterilization, it's something that we encounter in our job every day. And I think it'll be of interest to you. Enjoy this interview with Kelli Jonas from MediSurge. I'm here at MDM West with Kelli Jonas, who is the VP of Quality and Regulatory for MediSurge and Alliant Healthcare.
Yep, that's correct.
And we were just chatting yesterday on the show floor about the news item that we had last week on the show about ethylene oxide restrictions and what that's doing to the industry. And there was a lot to talk about there. So I asked Kelli, would you sit down and talk to me about this and how it impacts your company. But maybe just a personal word first, Kelli. You know, tell us about your role and with MediSurge and Alliant Healthcare.
Sure.
I also know, you know, you're a parent. I'm a parent. We've both had. We live in communities. We do have concerns about. We don't want toxic gases released into our communities. I know I've had, as recently as a couple of years ago, a child in the emergency room multiple times. I also want medical devices to be available to doctors and surgeons when they're necessary. And that's a tension sometimes in the community. But tell us about you and about your role.
Sure. So, so, you know, Kelli, I've been with MediSurge and Alliant for almost 6 years now. I'm a mother to a 9-year-old boy, very rambunctious boy, that has also been in and out. You know, we've had some surgeries here and there as, you know, healthy boy, but it can be, you know, you touched on it, it can be kind of concerning, you know, that balance between, you know, we're very active in the community. We live in Rockford, Michigan. It's a great little community, very active in that community, but also need to make sure that, you know, these devices that, you know, if my son needed something or somebody or a coworker or a friend needed something or a family member, that they're available.
They got to be there. It's got to be something that's made available.
Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit more about MediSurge and what you guys do and also the relationship between your little ecosystem of companies.
Yeah, sure. So the Alliant family of companies, we are, you know, it is actually three companies actually. We've got Alliant Healthcare Products, which is a direct-to-government sales division. It's the most mature company of the Alliant family companies, founded in 2002. My CEO, Bob Taylor, is a service-disabled veteran. So we have an SDVOSB status that allows us, we have the phenomenal sales staff and contracts people that can navigate through the rigors. We think the FDA can be a little challenging, navigating through the government. And just some of that stuff. So Alliant Healthcare is, you know, basically it allows us to help some bigger companies distribute to, you know, into the government.
That sales pipeline, I mean, that's huge. Every single startup that we've ever worked with, it's like, oh, we get you cleared, we get this designed, tested, everything else, but that question of, do you really have a plan on how you get this to market?
Exactly. So huge. It is big. And then MediSurge, that is our, you know, our FDA registered ISO, you know, ISO 13485 certified company. Started in 2016. I've been along for the ride since 2017. And, you know, we do predominantly contract manufacturing, a lot of cardiac devices, gene and cell therapy. We've talked about ethylene oxide, sterilization management, you name it. We recently just got into a contract manufacturing agreement with a hip and ortho company on the east side of the state. So we're going to become CNC experts.
Excellent.
So yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. And
an important and often overlooked part of the manufacturing process.
Absolutely. So we're getting a crash course in that. So it's pretty exciting times right now. And one of the things that we can offer, Keith, with the that SDVOSB is we kind of a differentiator for us is if we have companies that are wanting to get into the government, hey, let us do your manufacturing, and that does open up some of the floodgates, and it's a different sales channel for somebody that doesn't have any government experience.
Yeah, that seems like a huge offering.
Absolutely. So it's
that's really cool. Let's talk about ethylene oxide, because when you and I found that topic, I was like, oh, what are we going to do about this? We talked on the show last week about the different regulations that have come down, companies having to report. I mean, it's not easy to set up an ethylene oxide or any other sterilization cycle. I think a lot of companies are like, I just can send it out and get it sterilized.
It's good. Yeah.
But it's a lot of work that goes in. We've seen that from our perspective. So here you are, and you're going along, and now they're saying you got to do more reporting, you've got to reduce levels. Theragenics gets hit with nearly a $500 million fine, I think, or maybe it's, I forget the numbers. But how does that impact you?
Sure.
First of all, are you doing your own sterilization? You sending out? How does that work?
It's a great question, and one I'm very, very passionate about. So when I started at MediSurge in 2017, we had a cycle. It was a cycle that we owned that was developed for most of the cardiac surgery devices. Within 2 years, that sterilizer got shut down.
Wow.
They made the decision because it was too expensive to remediate what the EPA had said that they needed to do. So fast forward, 2019, I went through, found a sterilizer, and some of the challenges too. We're not this large company. Some sterilizers are like, sorry, Kelly, your volumes aren't big enough, and it gets to be a little concerning. So I did find a partner, validated the cycle. 2019 didn't miss a beat, and then just and it was fun. We were talking that last week I get a letter, official letter from my sterilizer that they are reducing their EO concentration levels. So I need to perform another full validation to be able to support the request, and it's not really a request, a mandate that they are doing.
And EPA is making that mandate.
It is. I think what they're doing is they're getting ahead of the game and hearing through the industry leaders that this is coming down and they better reduce their concentration levels, otherwise there could be some issues.
Wow. Now I think somebody who maybe hasn't been exposed to this before might say, well, Kelly, it's just the price of doing business. I mean, just revalidate it. Not a big. I don't think that's the case, though.
No,
tell us about what this involves.
It's not. It's first of all, it's cost, right? I mean, you're talking between $50,000 to $100,000 to do work like this, and I mean that's also includes the cost of parts, the cost of the labor that you need to do to build all of this stuff to be able to send to validate, And it really also is hurting my customers, because if you do something like this, the FDA or even like the EU is going to consider this a significant change. So you either are going to be rationalizing something or you're going to be testing. So it was definitely news that I broke to my customers over the phone as opposed to a letter, so we could kind of absorb what it could mean. Through it. For them.
Because this is going to cost on every product that you thought you had the manufacturing line all down.
Yes.
This is just going to add costs directly to that bottom line.
Exactly, yes.
That's incredible. What would be your recommendations? Like, a lot of our audience are people who are involved in early stage innovation, and they're thinking, oh yeah, I'm going to have to sterilize this product. And of course, there's different methods out there. You've got, E-beam and gamma.
I mean,
there's now hydrogen peroxide methods out there and stuff like that. But each comes with a drawback. I remember we've done gamma development, and you're yellowing the plastic because it's so harsh with what happens. So these are not just pick one and go with it. It actually depends on what materials you're using and everything else. What are you recommending to people right now for products that you're going to see or products you could see?
Sure. So, I caution about going to EO sterilization, even though it is, the most. I do caution just with the industry that with the way it's so volatile right now, and it is can be a political issue too. So, I say if there is something that you could look at, gamma, E-beam is very similar to gamma, but hey, let's look at that if it is possible with your, we might want to look at that, and that's one of the reasons why we do also have a gamma partner too, to make sure. And I am looking at some E-beam and other options to be able to educate my customers on that. Other thing that I would recommend is if you do want to go to EO, and we have to go to EO for X, Y, and Z. One of the things that I'm looking at as a full service contract manufacturer is getting another partner on board for EO sterilization.
So you have a backup.
So I have a backup in case something happens. You just never know in this industry right now, and you want to make sure that you're minimizing disruptions to your customer and to to get these devices in the field. So that's another recommendation that I'm actually looking at doing, and maybe finding one of my customers to partner with me on some shared cost. Trying to get creative on we're not going to
stick you with all of this.
Exactly.
But it represents a true additional cost boom right now that you weren't expecting.
Yep.
And I love your recommendation of source a few because there's a decent chance that with what's happening, one of them is going to go, sorry, this isn't worth our time anymore.
Correct.
We're just leaving the business.
Yep.
Or if we're going to focus on the business, we're going to focus it for some particular niche that...
Exactly.
Yeah.
Wow. So it is, and especially when you're navigating with your customers through all of this, the first thing is, cost and speed to market. And so that's what we're trying to get in front of to help them make the best decision possible. And that's why it's important for me to give them options.
Yeah, and to work with your customer to be able to get them the best thing in a nasty situation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. It's fun to see what you guys are doing behind the scenes to take care of your customers, and I appreciate you taking the time today, Kelli.
Well, thank you, Gene. It's been good. Great topic.
So much fun. Very current.
Yeah.
Thanks again.
Hey, thank you.
Well, I appreciate Kelli's time to sit down and talk with me. It really was fascinating, and she's a fascinating person to talk to. Just really engaged, cares about her company, cares about her community, and getting medical devices out there for people to use. While that video was actually running, I was looking into a question that came up during the third-party timelines. Right? These are taking a certain amount of time, but how long is that time actually? And if we go back to the iPad here for just a second, the total time to decision, FDA decision from third-party receipt for all of the providers, of which there's really one right now, we're sort of looking in this, I'm not sure which the average line is, whether it's the 125 days here, or it's this one here, but we're sort of in this mid-100 days total time to decision from third-party receipt. That's obviously not including the time for additional information that may be requested, would be the understanding there. But while I was, while we were out there for the video, and I'm going to see if we can go over to bring this graphic up on the screen. I'm hoping that's working. Steve, you'll let me know if it's not working. But if we just go to that screen, this great article from Ontogen MedTech, how long does a 510K approval actually take? The 2021 edition by Tyler Panion. So thank you, Tyler. And I skimmed through this because, you'll get all sorts of crazy data. One place that was just advertising their medical device development services said it takes between 1 week and 8 months. Well, that's not very helpful, actually. But there's a little bit more detail here. They got their data from openfda.gov, and the calendar days between the date of the 510K was received and the date of the final decision, excluding the additional information hold. So how much time you took in between to respond to FDA, not included, but the amount of time that FDA took. Here's the upshot. They looked at 1,400 traditional 510K submissions between January 1st and August 8th of 2021, and they found the total days to clearance. That review time, there were 11 outliers with a review time of greater than 600 days. Okay, so this actually isn't the absolute average. This has removed the 2-year outliers. Okay, so this isn't quite the total average. The longest time to approval being 1,178 days. Okay, so leaving those aside, the average time for 510K clearance was 175 days. And here you can actually see a bit of a, that's not quite a stem and leaf plot, but a sort of a heat map of, on average, these are sort of clustering there. They tail out to greater than 600 days. Oh, it's a histogram. Thank you. You know, and my mother is a PhD statistician, so right now, if she's watching, she's probably rolling over and shuddering because I mislabeled that. She was always a fan of stem and leaf plots. So shout out to mom and dad for teaching me a bunch of things that I haven't necessarily retained correctly. Thanks, Steve. Histogram. The most common window to clearance is 80 to 90 days, followed very closely by 50 to 60 days. FDA days. So yeah, but quite a wide range. So people say, how long does that 510K take? This is a great graphic. Thanks, Antigen MedTech, for this article, because some really great research there. Where do you fall in this? Well, if you're going to make a project plan, let's use these sort of median days. How does that differ from the third-party review time? Well, it's a much smaller number. But if we look at the iPad again, we're going to see that this is not so crazy different from what we see from FDA in general. We're in that same vicinity. Is it saving time? Well, you might have to look at some specific device types, specific divisions, to really be able to get a sense of whether the third party is going to save you time. But right now, it does appear that there is functionally, at least for the last quarter, there's functionally one group doing that work, and that's RTS. So there you go for the third-party world. Wanted to bring you that extra little tidbit there from FDA and the nice article by Antigen MedTech. But with that brings us up near the end of the hour. I'm going to take a moment in case there are any questions, comments, events that we don't have listed. Hey, we always want to hear about events we don't have listed. So feel free to put those either in the chat, or if we can bring you live, we're happy to bring you on audio if that becomes something you like to do. We'd be looking for raised hands in the Zoom webinar or chats in the Zoom webinar, or we're also monitoring chats on YouTube. So if you're on YouTube, you can type it into the chat there, and we would be just happy to bring you an answer. So we'll give it just a minute more. In the coming weeks, we're going to bring you interviews with the folks who are at MD&M West in the Michigan booth, so that you can see who was there with the MEDC delegation. Something in the mid-70s of Michigan companies on the trade show floor exhibiting, and a number more that we met who were not exhibiting but were just walking the floor. So it's good to see Michigan out and about. I caught up with a number of folks on the plane ride back, so it's really great to see Michigan out there doing things at in-person events. So not seeing any comments or questions, I want to thank you for being here with us on MedTech Crossroads. Remember, you can get to these on Spotify as well as YouTube after they've shown. And so I hope you enjoy them. Send us your questions, send us your comments. You can always reach us at info@intobeing.com. And I suppose I should just mention that you should probably like and subscribe, because then we will increase our viewership on YouTube and on Spotify. Wow, that was the most dry sales pitch I've ever made in my entire life. There you go.
Before we go here, we do have one question.
Oh, we got a question. Great. Thanks, Steve. What do we have? Oh, how can you get in touch with Intobeing? Well, we're happy to answer that too as well. How can I get in touch? info@intobeing.com. That's INFO @intobeing.com. You can reach us, whether it's for what Intobeing does or anything we talk about on the show. We're more than happy to respond to you there. Thanks for that question. I see another hand up actually right now. Are we able to bring Rebecca live there, Steve? All right. We're going to try to bring you live here, Rebecca, and see if that works. Let's see if we can hear you. Looks like she's muted. Just unmute yourself in Zoom there and it should work. Oh. No, we had a drop off there. That was weird. Anyways, maybe we'll get that question next week. Not seeing any other hands up. I really appreciate y'all being here today. Thank you for your time. Hope you have a great rest of... Oh, wait. It's nearly the weekend. Steve, we need like weekend theme music for, 3 o'clock on a Friday. I don't think we're there yet, but I think we do have this theme music for you, so see you next week.